Here's something most Michiganders probably don't know. Singapore-linked investors now own roughly 5% of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of acres of Michigan forest tied to overseas investment funds. Part of a bigger trend that's reshaping who owns farmland and forest across our state. Some lawmakers are sounding alarms about foreign land ownership.
Foreign adversaries have been quietly buying land near U.S. military bases, even here in Michigan.
Others say it's no big deal. So what's actually happening here? This is So What Michigan, where we cut through the noise and show you who's really buying up our state and why it matters, even if you've never heard about it. Here's the deal. According to the latest federal data, foreign entities now own about 1.9 million acres of agricultural land in Michigan. That's about 9% of our farmland and about 5% of all land in the state. But here's the twist. About 90% of that foreign-owned land isn't farms. It's forest. We're mostly talking about timberland in the Upper Peninsula, not cornfields or dairy operations. And the numbers keep climbing. Foreign investors are required to report these purchases to the USDA, and MLive crunched the numbers. They found foreign ownership in Michigan has more than doubled since 2014. Every year, more and more acres are being sold to overseas buyers, and most Michiganders don't even know it's happening. So, who's buying? In Michigan, the biggest player is Singapore, or more specifically, timber investment firms tied to Singapore's government wealth fund. Bridge Michigan traced the ownership through layers of LLCs and complex ownership structures to two firms, Verdant Timber and Sage Timber. Together, they own more than 540,000 acres across the UP. Then there's Canada and the Netherlands, which combined own more than 800,000 acres. And last year, two Japanese investment firms bought another 67,000 acres of UP forest as part of a climate-focused fund that's aimed at carbon capture and sustainable timber. Their pitch? Forests are a long-term investment and a climate solution. They're buying up land and locking it down as long-term timber and carbon investments. And it's working. Michigan farmland values have jumped 34% in just 5 years. What used to cost $5,000 an acre now goes for nearly $7,000. For overseas investors, that's a steady, low-risk return. Still, this trend is starting to make some Michigan lawmakers uneasy. That's because foreign ownership of farmland has become a political flashpoint, especially around China. Republicans across the country have been pushing bills to ban foreign adversaries from buying American farmland, framing it as a national security threat. In Michigan, the House passed bills last year that would block countries like China, Russia, and Iran from owning Michigan farmland, plus require all foreign-owned land to be registered with the state. Another bill would ban foreign purchases within 20 miles of a military base. State Representative Gina Johnson, who sponsored one of the bills, said, "Allowing our enemies to scoop up our farmland puts national security at risk." But here's the problem with that argument. Chinese investors own just 1% of all foreign-held agricultural land in the entire U.S. In Michigan, there have been 0 filings tied to China. Iranian investors only own 547 acres nationwide. Russian investors? 11 acres. North Korea? 0. So, if this is a national security crisis, it's one being driven by countries we're already allied with, not our enemies. Economists aren't buying the panic either. They point out foreign entities still only own a small fraction of Michigan's farmland, and the U.S. produces way more food than it needs to feed itself. But that doesn't mean there aren't still real questions worth asking. Like, who benefits when foreign investors drive up land values? What happens to public access when private firms buy up massive chunks of the Upper Peninsula? And why is it so hard to trace who actually owns what when everything's buried under shell companies and LLCs? So what? Well, foreign investors now own nearly 1 in 10 acres of Michigan's agricultural land, and that number keeps on climbing. Most of it is Upper Peninsula forest, owned by firms from Singapore, Japan, Canada, and the Netherlands. Almost none of it is owned by China, but Republicans in Lansing are pushing bills to crack down anyway, framing it as a national security crisis, even though the data doesn't support the fear-mongering. The real issues? Transparency, affordability, and whether Michiganders deserve a say in who gets to buy up huge pieces of our state. Because land isn't just an investment. In Michigan, it's tied to our identity, our economy, and our future. And when that much is being sold, it matters. Hit follow. I'll keep tracking who's buying Michigan, what they're doing with it, and whether lawmakers actually address the real problems or just keep chasing boogeymen that don't exist.